Hey everyone, this is a McLean's article. Now, for some reason, I seen that in my feed today, but when I look at the actual article itself, it was originally published on September 30th, 2016. So, not 100% sure why it was uploaded again or propagated in the news feed, but the headline caught my eye, and it is something that's very important that we all should be talking about. And this is by Jason Kirby. The headline, like I say, it's McLean's. Canada's demographic gap can't be filled with immigrants. Despite the record number of immigrants who came to Canada in the last year, it is not nearly enough to fill the gap left behind by retiring baby boomers. So, like I say, this was towards the end of last year, well, September 30th, so almost October of 2016. What was the Liberal government reading this article and saying, "Well, let's ramp it up even more, boys"? It seems like that way. I mean, look at all the illegal asylum seekers and the Syrian refugees and the numbers that are skewing much higher for 2017. So, like I say, seems that instead of listen to the kind of warnings that is put forth presented in this article, they were like, "Well, we'll just increase the numbers. There, that'll fix that problem, right?" Like, is it really, are liberals really that fucking inept when it comes to math and demographics and economics? And I hate to even call them liberals because, Jesus, Adam Smith was a liberal in the classical sense. It's like, they're not, I can't even call them liberals. Like I say, collectivists, socialists, progressives, and progressives, that term really just means a socialist, more or less, as far as I can take. As far as I can understand with the kind of rhetoric and the kind of shit they put forth, you just rebranded the term. Well, they're a form of a collectivist, right? So there's socialists, communists, fascists. Progressives are just another iteration of that collective ideology. But let's get into this actual article and see what Mr. Jason Kirby is talking about here. We've known since the Trudeau government was elected last year that 2016 would bring with it one of the largest influxes of immigrants in modern Canadian history. Now we have the numbers to back it up. According to Statistics Canada, the country took in 321,000 immigrants in the 2015-16 year, the largest number of newcomers in a single year since 1910. And let me just point out right now, the difference between 1910 and 2016 is in 19 there was no such thing as gigantic government bureaucracy, right? The forced wealth redistribution model, socialism, all these social safety nets, which are just fancy words for socialist endeavors, right? That forced wealth redistribution model, the welfare state, none of that existed in 1910. And if you go back to that time, you would never hear people like myself or anyone, libertarians, or even critical thinkers, or even classical liberals, or even conservatives that would have cared. Like, hey, listen, come in, come all. Most people enjoy all the different variances of the different cultures that are brought forth, as long as we all understand that we got to play by the same rules, right? We love the fact, and I, as a Canadian of Irish and Scottish descent, the Irish and the Scottish aren't really known for having all these great foods, right? I'm very appreciative, and it isn't just foods. I know I'm making light to a certain degree, but I'm very appreciative of having access to many different cultures, right? Or not necessarily cultures, but cultural practices and things that people did in different geographical locations around the world throughout history. I'm very appreciative of the fact that they can bring some of their, as long as it's all voluntarily and it's not imposed on anyone. I'm appreciative of all the different variances of people from many different geographical land masses and regions around the world, right? As most Canadians are, and most Americans are. I mean, America and Canada to a lesser extent, but Canada not really. But America, it was all about, hey, come one, come all. Yeah. We're all about freedom, and we don't see race. The United States is actually the first country ever that wasn't identified by the race, their dominant race, right? If you go to Portugal, they're Portuguese. If you go to China, they're Chinese. If you go to Spain, they're Spanish. If you go to, what this all... United States, there's no, United States. It's not says the United White States, right? It doesn't say United Black States. It doesn't say United Brown, or it doesn't say United Christian States or the United. It was the United States. Hey, come one all, bring your whatever. You're tired, you're weary, whatever the hell. I mean, it was all about. There was nothing racist or sexist or anything. It was come one all, come all. But you got to be productive members of this particular society because we're all about doing the right thing, right? About individuals. Fuck the collectivism of old world Europe. We see where that goes, and even in the mid 20th, earlier to mid 20th century, they seen. Well, there you go. Look what collectivism does. We had to come and bail these motherfuckers out. We had to go to war and fight on behalf of these collectivist cultures. And you know what? We're tired of losing men and fucking destroying families and our cultures to try to help you fucking parasites out. Deal with your own mess is what they should have said back in the day. But anyways, let's get away from that. But I mean, if you think about that number, not just the fact that, like I said, the difference between 1910 and 2016 is the difference between you as a Canadian citizen or your kids or your grandkids are going to have to be forced to subsidize or pay for all this bullshit. Not just the bureaucracy, all that government bureaucracy, but all these people come to the country that will be soaking up and sponging off of the resources and everything that you've produced so far in this economy, right? Those are two huge variances and differences that should be at the forefront and at front and center when you're talking or discussing anything about this kind of bullshit, especially illegal immigrants. But just the number alone, 320,000. Canada is a population of only between 35 and 36 million, depending on the particular numbers. Like I've seen it high 35 million, low 36 million. But let's just say 36 million. 300,000 people in a country of only 36 million in 1 year. I mean, just think about it. In just 3 years alone, those kind of numbers would put you already at another million, right? That would add another million people already in a population of only 36 million. That's a substantial number, folks. And you know in 2017, like I say, these numbers are skewing higher. So you may very well get, in less than 3 years, almost a million extra people in this country. That's just something that no society should ever even attempt to try to deal with. I mean, what are they trying to? What was the Liberal government trying to mirror the fucking Germans? Hey, we're not the German people. You know, the Germans probably have some pretty fucked up mentality or psychology rolling around their head because of all the Hitler bullshit, right? But wait, we're Canada, right? We shouldn't have that kind of fucking goddamn pretense of we have to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good because we're so, our forefathers were so evil or what. I don't know. I don't understand that concept anyways of blaming people in the past. Deal with what's right in the here and now, yes, by all means. But don't use just because someone did something in the past, bad in the past, that you got to make up for it by fucking doing other bad things in the future or in the present, right? Shit, man. That sure sounds like a lot of new Canadians. More people to work, to buy homes, to reignite the Canadian economy, which is more or less the pitch that Canada's Immigration Minister John McCallum has made of late in building the case for higher levels of immigration. Canada is an aging country, so we are in need of new blood, he said recently. Canadians aren't having enough babies, and so the labor force growth depends very much on the entrance of immigrants. But this is a politician saying, so Canadians aren't having enough children. Gee, I wonder why that would be, John. You fucking dipshit, piece of fucking stupid dumbass, fucking older, fucking, what was he, what would he be, a senior baby boomer or one of the fucking leftovers from the Greys generation? I don't know where the fuck this piece of shit come from or where his mentality comes from. But yeah, the reason why Canadians aren't having as many kids, gee, I wonder why that would be, because they can't. Who can afford it? You fucking bureaucratic piece of shit politicians have made it so goddamn expensive for anyone to even try to have any kids, right? And be able to do things productively on their own without turning to the state to subsidize them. And a lot of people don't want to deal with you motherfuckers. So you fuckers caused the problem, and now you're fucking causing even more fucking problems because the problems that people that came before you caused those problems. Politicians are at the heart of all the problems that we see in the fucking Canadian landscape today. Recognize in real life that shit, Canada. Here's the problem with that, they say. But this is showing a chart. Immigration to Canada in 2016 by age. Population excluding immigrants. So they're showing in blue this, and I'll show the chart, in this video. But it's showing the population excluding immigrants, and then in red they're showing the immigrants, and then the demographic gap. The chart above is an update and slight modification of one of of one originally produced by University of Laval economist Stephen Gordon 5 years ago. It shows Canada's population by age in 2016 with a new immigration population layered on top. Despite the large number of immigrants who arrived in the last year, their contribution to Canada's population is still small compared to the gap in the working age population left behind by retiring baby boomers. How small? The shortfall in the prime working age population, those aged 20 to 50, is around 2.2 million people. In other words, that's the number of people missing from Canada's economy as population growth slowed after the baby boom, which peaked with those aged 53. If every immigrant that Canada brought in was in that 20 to 50 age range, and if the country were able to maintain the level of immigration it did this year, it would take roughly 7 years to make up for the gap behind the boomer peak, all things being equal. But of course, not all immigrants are in that age group. As this chart also shows, growth in Canada's working age population is about to drop off significantly as that hollow and under 20-year-olds edges into their working years. This all means that even more immigrants will be needed to fill the gap. This isn't to say immigrants can't mitigate the effects of Canada's aging population. The country's ability to absorb people from diverse cultures is an advantage remarkably few other nations enjoy. Anyways, I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below. But I mean, basically, no matter how they try to twist or distort or narrate this particular demographic time bomb, what it really comes down to is you're looking at, just like if your parents, right? I mean, how would you be able to hold each other to account if your parents, every time that you want to hold them to account for any particular thing, they could say, I don't have to listen to anything you guys say. I got this new person I can bring in to take your place, right? If that was the case, then, well, and it is the case right now with big government. It's basically, they're trying to, it's I call it the great replacement. They're trying to replace their successive generations and their offsprings that they've impeded and hogtied and basically retarded the ability for them to create real genuine economic growth and prosperity. They've retarded that to the point where it's like, oh shit, now we got to bring in people. And it's like, but you're not even going to untie the hands and the feet of the very people that you fucking oppressed all these years. Now you're like, nah, I don't want to do that, because if I do, they'll probably create a lot of economic prosperity, but they probably won't want to share it with me because I was brutal and authoritarian and treat them like garbage and dog shit, right? So it's like, no, let's bring in new, fresh blood, because I haven't treated those people like garbage or dog shit, and those people, they might not produce as much, but it'll be enough to sustain us, right? That's the mentality of these fucking, especially a large segment of the boomer cohorts, that demographic that went into politics, all about power and these corporate elites and these fucktards. That's really what you're looking at today. They don't want to do the right thing. They want to do the wrong thing at every junction, and they've made so many mistakes. Rather than own up to their mistakes and accept the hardships and the pitfalls of all their bad fucking decisions and vile behaviors in the past, they're like, we'll figure out a way to impose the hardships and the restrictions on our generation once again, on our successive generations once again, and we'll hope that if we just bring in enough foreigners, enough immigrants, that they'll be able to take up the slack and keep our pensions funded until we're done. And once we're dead, well, we don't really give a shit at that point, right? That's the mentality. That's the psychology that's rolling around in the heads, especially the bulk, the majority of these central planning elites in the media, in politics, and in corporations. Recognize and realize this stuff, Canada. You really need to do so. Especially you younger millennials. You might think your grandparents are willing to take care of you now. That's only because they feel guilty because they never fucking did shit for their own kids, right? But they'll fucking try to make up that difference by helping you. But it's like, don't you care about, the people in between? Don't you care about the Gen Xers that are still going to be around? They're not going anywhere, right? And they're pretty strong, they're pretty resilient, and they're pretty independent, right? And they're, for the most part, live and let live type of people, right? Show some solidarity with them. Don't turn to the ways of the boomers, right? Don't use central planning and governments and forced wealth distribution as a means, as a model for you to benefit yourself at the expense of everyone else. Because another generation will come up behind you, and they're going to be watching everything you do. And they may very well want to impose that same kind of hardships, that same kind of wealth redistribution as you did on other generations. What goes around comes around. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.